this talk today is about technology development and how it relates to academic research and commercial enterprise. Thank you, Adrian, and thank you all for this opportunity to speak with you. It's a real pleasure to be here today. The theme of the program today is accelerating connections between biomedical research and the healthcare markets, and this, to me, is really about technology development, its process for success, and about the resources that are needed, such as financings, capital equipment, intellectual property, and above all else, human capital. The technology development process starts, as we all know, with an idea or a discovery or an invention, and if all of the hurdles are overcome, then it ends with products that are, either goods or services. And in healthcare tech development, these goods or services are often of great value to society and impact many individuals directly. Whether it's a cardiac stent, or a new oncology drug, or a treatment for diseases like malaria or schistosomiasis, the initial idea is usually, it's often driven to its endpoint by a desire to commercialize the technology. So there is often, though not always, a profit motive aligned with most successful technology development. Money has to come from somewhere. In fact, every step along the path requires financial support of some type, and we'll talk about what those types might be. Whether it's taxpayer-funded grants for basic discovery research, or, let's talk about that one for a second. The reason that taxpayers pay for research and development in academia is because they want to receive goods and services. They would prefer a drug that cures cancer rather than a publication that explains cancer. And so for those of us who spend a lot of time in academia, we focus on discovery research, basic research, and we don't all the time think about the commercial end. But it's just the beginning of the process of moving technology out to the marketplace to return something to the people who actually paid for this. Or if it's a venture capitalist or corporate investment, then you've still got to have money around to drive this process at different stages. And so money turns out to be the lubricant for technology development. So from start to finish, there always has to be capital available at every stage, not just to pay a medical device company, shareholders, or pharmaceutical company shareholders, but to pay graduate students and postdocs and people like that. And so any time there's a gap in funding, technology development comes to a halt. How do we do all of this technology development stuff? Often the process starts with a first series of experiments, and when they're done, there'll be a proof of concept phase, which may include some in vitro or animal studies and testing, prototype development if it's a device, and some filing of intellectual property. All of this costs a lot more money. And a choice must be made whether to continue forward or to halt the program if the testing is not looking good. Assuming it looks great, then sometimes the technology will end up being licensed to a large company, or a startup company will be formed. The formation of a startup will require attorneys, accountants, managers, people who raise money, along with the technical team. Fundraising may be from friends and family initially, followed by angel investors, and those angel investors usually fund in the range up to about $1 million. If you need to raise more money than that, You'll probably go to venture capital firms. Additionally, more funds may come from grants and corporate alliances. Someday, receiving revenues from may come from sales of products or goods. That's sort of how money arrives at along the technology development pipeline. Along the way, there's formulation development or scale-up, manufacturing, marketing, sales, distribution. All of this infrastructure has to be paid for, as well as clinical studies in ever-increasing size trials. All of this, of course, is very expensive, and to develop a market for a new drug today can cost approximately $1 billion US dollars. So as you can see from what I've just covered, it's going to take a wide variety of skills and experiences to develop a device or drug and get it to the marketplace. No one person is able to do all of this, nor are they expected to do that. Instead, it's important to bring in the right people at the right time. So for example, in startup companies, it's often the case that the CEO that starts the company will be replaced as the company gets larger because the skill set doesn't fit. For example, in my own experiences, I've done a lot of startups and done a lot of seed stage venture investing. And I would say at this point, through the experiences that I've had, good and bad, and maybe because I have a lot of scar tissue from having done a lot of startups and having had a number of them blow up and a few successes, that I make a really good CEO at the earliest of stages. So I'm good at raising capital, pulling talent together, doing build-outs, licensing technology and things like that. So in the earliest and least stable and riskiest part, that's my sweet spot. If the company was up over 100 people, I'd be the wrong guy for it, and I'm sure my board of directors would recognize that and replace me with the next CEO. So that's something that happens in the earliest stages of startups. The skills for all of these jobs that are in these startups can and they are learned over time, whether they're management, sales, technical, regulatory, legal, whatever. But very few people are naturals in these different areas. And no matter how smart you are, you still need to learn how to do these things. And training experience are key. And the reason I say this is because oftentimes we have very bright scientists and engineers that want to be entrepreneurs. They have technology and they want to spin them out into companies, and they end up running the company, but they don't have the business experience. And sometimes the companies go sideways from this. And so it's kind of strange as somebody who started my career as a chemist, I thought that the science end of things was the hard part, and the business part was not the hard part, and that I could naturally do this. And after many years, I learned the business part is the hard part because people don't behave like electrons, and they're unpredictable, and markets don't behave like electrons, and they don't follow the rules. So there's a lot to learn in this, and sometimes technologists don't know that, and they find out the hard way that they need training. And the analogy I would like to use for any of the technologists in this room, if somebody had an MBA from a place like Wharton or Harvard, or pick your place, but no scientific background, and they wanted to come into your lab and do some experiments this afternoon, how receptive would you be for them doing that? And I think most scientists would say not at all. And yet, scientists often think that they can dive right into business development with no training, but it's just as problematic as the other way. Okay, so what do you do? So fortunately, you can get help with all of these things from the University Tech Transfer Office and the business school personnel and angel investors and service providers, which by that I mean lawyers and accountants and other people that supply support services to companies. And you can also talk to the pool of other entrepreneurs. So as technologists, scientists, and engineers, you'll need to work with the business professionals, and likely will have some of them as investors and on your board of directors. So it's important to understand what motivates them. It's likely different in some ways than what motivates you as a technologist. In fact, what does motivate them? Let's talk about that. If you're dealing with venture capitalists, unless they're very wealthy venture capitalists who have their own funds for their venture fund, they probably went out to raise capital for their funds from a group of people called limited partners. In order to get that money, they had to tell the limited partners what they were going to do with their money. And in that sense, they will only invest in certain types of companies at certain stages in certain geographical areas. And they need to get high rates of return, or the venture capital fund is no longer attractive and they can't raise the next venture capital fund. So they're looking for good investments with good returns. They're looking at your company and the deal that they'll do with you from an economic standpoint and somewhat of a control standpoint. Not because they want to constantly micromanage you and tell you what to do, but because they want to make sure their investments are safe. So what would it be that constitutes a good target for investments? Well, as somebody, again, who started his career as a technologist and didn't know anything about business at the time, everything that I made at the lab bench as a chemist, I tried to push towards the marketplace. That's very common, and that's called the push model. It's sort of the old saying of, if we build it, they will come. And they will come, but they may not buy. Okay, so the push model is a very dangerous model, and instead what people want is a pull model. And a pull model is easy to understand. When I have an idea in technology that I want to develop towards a product, early on in the process, I need to go out and I need to understand the market. And so the market is really just this. It's just really simple questions. Who wants to buy my stuff? How much will they pay? How many people will buy this? What's my competition? How long will it take me to get it into the market? What are the barriers? And so so basically what I've done is I've jumped from the bench all the way out to the marketplace and then drawn a line back all the way to the bench so that I have a pathway out to the marketplace. In other words, I'm going to work on something that has real market needs instead of what I think is cool. Okay? And so that's a pull model. And it doesn't guarantee you that you'll be successful, but at least you have a path forward to go on. And investors want to understand your pull model. And once they understand that, how do they decide whether or not to invest in you? Well, part of it's a due diligence list that they go through. They look at your intellectual property assets. They look at your management team, the experience that you have. They look at the competition. They look at if it's medical devices or therapeutics and you want to sell into the US market, they look at reimbursement issues. And they look at a lot of other issues like that. And then they also want to develop a personal feel. And the reason they want to develop a personal feel is because they're going to be in this for a long, long time with you, and it's a team effort. And dysfunctional teams really cause a lot of problems. In early stage companies, they're unstable in the very beginning. They're a lot like, every day in a startup's a lot like being on a pirate ship. You know, there aren't a whole lot of rules. And it's usually, with few people, it turns out that most of those people are highly driven, assertive, maybe aggressive, and very determined. And so if there's team dysfunctionalities, it shows up really fast, and investors try to understand whether the team's going to be successful in holding together. And a lot of it has to do with understanding whether the people on the team have mutual respect for everyone and their capabilities. So I'll tell you a short story about team dysfunctionalities, because I know a lot about that. I did a startup years ago out of Caltech that was an electronic nose company. And an electronic nose company is a broad-based chemical sensing company. So you would use these sensors to detect all sorts of materials for hazardous waste or the food industry or a whole bunch of other things. And there were 3 founders. And there was a good founder, there was a neutral founder, and there was another founder. Okay? And the other founder was extremely smart. He was an extremely smart technologist who knew nothing about business. But he didn't know that he knew nothing about business. And so I had the pleasure as the first employee of this company of trying to do early stage business development. So I was now trying to straddle business and technology. And so every day I would have a conversation with him about what I was doing with his technology. And while I was looking to do medical device development and relate the technology in that area and to look for high margin opportunities, one day he came in and told me that I should spend my time talking to a coffee company down the road about using the nose technology to sort bad coffee beans from good coffee beans. Okay. So I told him, no, I wouldn't do that because coffee is a thin margin commodity, and the coffee industry is not likely to pay for technology that's expensive like this to sort bad coffee beans when they already know how to do that. So I'm not doing it. Well, that caused a lot of dysfunctionality. And there was day after day after day of these kinds of business opportunities put to me to go do. So eventually, I left the company and went down the street to start another Caltech company. But before I did, I was able to do a deal with a company called Welch Allyn, which does medical devices, and bring in a lot of capital and have them as equity partners in this company to use the technology on the medical devices. So not that I haven't made a lot of mistakes in my career, and I certainly have, but I was right and he was wrong. And he was wrong because even though he was a really smart guy, he was a technologist who had no business background, so he had bad business sense. And that's a common point. And the point that I want to make is that scientists and business people can work really well together, but they have to respect each other in both directions in order to get the best out of each other and to play to their strengths. So investors often look for teams that they're going to be comfortable with that can drive things forward, because though people say life's too short, when you have one of those situations where it's dysfunctional, it's not true. It's life's too long. And you get reminded of that every day. So really, it's a difficult path to do technology development, but you can do it. And for researchers, you have to do it because society is really depending on you to move this forward. And so let me just say what happens when one of these things blows up, when it fails. Okay? Because people always get upset about the risk and the failure. And your investors, if they're sophisticated investors and they've done this before, they've had some of these blow up. They've lost some money. That's what venture capital is about. It's about losing a bunch of these but hitting a few home runs. And so they know it's high risk. But even in a failed company, even in a failed startup, it was worth doing it because there's lessons to extract from the exercise. Plus, you've created a lot of good jobs along the way for people, high-paying jobs, high-quality jobs. And you've trained a lot of people so that they can take this training and use it in the next company, and you develop the technology which is a building block for the next stage, and you can learn from this and you can start again. Now, in some cultures, you get punished brutally for failure. In the one that I was brought up in the United States, for people that do startups, if you fail at everything, that's probably not good, but if you get a little bit of road rash on you now and then, that's not a bad thing, okay? And you can move forward and do another one of these again. So if it turns out, though, that this time you didn't fail and you were successful, you get all of the good things I just mentioned, plus you get to enrich society with products that they need, especially in healthcare. You get to enrich the investors, and as a technologist, your technology was moved into the marketplace, and so that translation is really important. It's good for you, and what I really wanted to say about this is that you can do all of that without leaving academia, without giving up your research career, and still have that and still do all these other things to drive technology, out into the marketplace and do something that's really important. So, with that, I'll thank you for your patience with this, and I'll take any questions if you have any.